helps us all. We're just pieces in a puzzle, and the more pieces we can connect, the more we get clarity. And it's what's amazing out there right now is people have certain people are pieces of very valuable pieces of a puzzle, and they have no idea of their value. And if I can bring them together, you said something just now about inflation in America, inflation in the UK. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to work out that if your fuel is costing you 100% more than it was last year, and your food is costing you 50% more than it was last year, and your timber is costing you 600% more than it was last year, the fact that inflation is only 8%, what on earth are they talking about? I mean, inflation of what?
Yeah. Well, and people crazy. I mean, the incomes are not going up, anything near that.
No, exactly.
And also today, talk about the portal over the White House.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got a guy that's been there to look at it. So, that's an area that I don't have much expertise in, but he's got interest in that, and he can bring that out. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. My audience will be very, very interested to know Roger's story and what he's been through, because he's been through an awful lot with, people turning up at the door and silly o'clock in the morning and on mass, and the way that they bully people. Susan, I appreciate you bringing us all together, because God has given us this platform to get the truth out. You're not getting the truth out on mainstream media, but we've been blessed with that opportunity. It comes with a lot of responsibility, and I do have the pleasure today of having Roger Stone with us and Michael McAllister with us, thanks to Susan for bringing them here, so that we can get the truth out to an audience of people who are seeking the truth. We're in a very interesting time, so I'm going to hand over so that you can tell us what has been happening to you, what has happened to you, and what is happening in general.
Well, I think, as most people probably know, I have a 42-year friendship with Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. I started urging him to think about running for president as early as 1988. So when he would express dissatisfaction with the choices, at that point, George H.W. Bush and Michael Dukakis, he said to me one day, "Surely there must be someone better." And I said, "Well, there really is." And he said, "Well, we need to get behind them." And I said, "Well, I was thinking about you." And he said, "You're out of your mind." I said, "No, why do you say that? You have strong opinions. You have independent wealth. Nobody owns you. Nobody can influence you. You're very much your own man. You have very strongly formed ideas about trade, about the strength of the military, about the inadequacies of NATO, or I should say the unfairness of NATO, where we were footing everybody's bill. You'd be a great candidate. You have international name ID. Everybody knows who Donald Trump is, which, with the cross-section of politics and pop culture, being well known is the single greatest and potentially most expensive asset. Trump had already achieved that because he's, let's face it, the greatest promoter, the greatest salesman of all time. Walk outside your studio and ask people, the first three people you meet, who Marco Rubio is. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you they have no idea. Mm-hmm. So he, as you know, he elected not to run in 1988, although he did stick his toe in the water. We made a exploratory trip to New Hampshire, which was a media sensation. But I also think, in retrospect, the country's not ready for somebody who didn't come from the political class. The country was not ready for somebody who hadn't been a senator or a governor or a general, as most of our presidents have been. He then looked at it very seriously again in 2000. That's because his friend Ross Perot, the billionaire. See, Charlie, one of these things I figured out is all these billionaires know each other. Mm-hmm. Even if they don't know each other, they always pretend they know each other. Mm-hmm. Ross Perot, who had made quite a dent as an independent candidate running twice, and who loved his country, was a patriot, really tried to persuade Trump to run in 2000 as the candidate of the Reform Party, which had a lot of substantial legal and financial benefits because it was already on the ballot in 30 states, had a permanent ballot position. The nominee of the Reform Party would automatically get a $39 million check from the federal treasury under the old federal campaign financing rules. So he did seriously consider running that early, but even I now admit the time was not right. As 2012 arrived, he looked at it again, but he decided late to examine it. He made a miscalculation that Mitt Romney would be the nominee. He was right about that, but he also thought he would be a winner. He was entirely wrong about that. He deeply regretted his support for Mitt Romney, as it turns out. And then, of course, in 2016, he won one of the most improbable come from behind victories in American political history. And in doing so, he upset the two-party duopoly, who, although on television they pretend that they're fighting, really believe in pretty much the same thing, which is to say their own reelection and the wielding of power and influence and money. They had, as the president said, consistently put America last. So you were at that episecond in time where the American people were ready for something entirely different. And the fact that Trump was not a polished politician, clearly a guy working without a net, in other words, saying what came into his mind, not working off of talking points prepared by some 25-year-old writer or staffer. He was genuine. He was authentic. He was interesting. He was entertaining. And today, Richard Nixon once said to me, the only thing in politics worse than being wrong is being boring. Well, one thing Donald Trump never was boring. Because we had been friends for 42 years, because I had worked for him for 30 of those 42 years, in the immediate aftermath of his election, those he defeated, both those in and outside of government, launched what would become known as the Russian collusion hoax. That is the idea that Russian intelligence somehow assisted in the election of Donald Trump, which is what allowed him to beat Hillary Clinton. We now know definitively $300 million later, and after the destruction of many lives, that it was a hoax, that there is no evidence whatsoever of Russian assistance to Donald Trump's campaign. I saw an investigator for Adam Schiff on an interview yesterday. He says, now we still know that the Trump campaign solicited help from Russia, received help from Russia, and benefited from help from Russia. To which I said, exactly what form did that assistance take? They can't answer that question because it didn't happen. And what was the benefit? There was no benefit. They essentially could not admit that Trump, a first-time candidate, kind of blustering his way through a presidential campaign, doing these massive rallies, had beaten Hillary and Bill Clinton, who had more experience at presidential campaign technique than anyone in the country. So I almost immediately became the victim of the Russian collusion witch hunt. For 2.5 years, my wife and I were vilified, smeared, bankrupted, gagged. So I wasn't allowed to defend myself. So the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, they could claim I was a traitor, that I was a Russian asset. All of this, by the way, is on the basis of no evidence whatsoever. And it was a debilitating 2-year investigation in which I lost my home, I lost my car, I lost my savings, I lost my insurance, I lost my ability to make a living because the judge placed an unconstitutional gag on me, meaning the Washington Post and the New York Times and the CNN could say anything they wanted about me, but I was not allowed to respond in any forum. I couldn't come on a show like this. I couldn't even post on social media